Hey, friend. How are ya? Feeling queasy? Yeah, same here. Seems like our world's burning. Seems like our healthcare system still sucks. Seems like we still can't be guaranteed a living wage while the cost of living climbs higher and higher. And it seems like some greedy, wealthy scumbags continue to buy off our politicians, ensuring that nothing gets done to solve these problems. So, we're gonna chill. We're gonna do our best to nihilistically chuckle at the mess we're in. We're gonna talk about the unnatural state of affairs here on WMTS 88.3 FM with your very own host, Big Dog Ethan. It's going to be a fun time, friends. What's happening, friend? Big Dog Ethan here, coming at you on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is none other than the unnatural state of affairs, where we discuss all the notable developments in our unnaturally corrupt American political system, and then we bang our heads to some boppin' tunes, which, yeah, I got a lot of those for you today. But before I get to that, I'm gonna do two things, really. One, gonna lick some wounds, more like little scratches, after I made that horribly wrong prediction for the presidential election results last week. And then I'm gonna air out a flurry of I told you so's. Hopefully that shouldn't take too long, and then we'll get to those tunes, because yeah, I'm sure a lot of y'all need some distraction after last week's events. Alrighty, so first, some scratches to lick. So yeah, for those who watched last week's episode, you'll notice that while my lazy prediction on the Senate results was right, my prediction for the presidential result was wrong. Like, very wrong. Now, my prediction wasn't based off any polls because, I mean, really, I couldn't use any polls to make the prediction. As I said, some political analysts were raising questions with the reliability of the polls. According to Nate Silver, the odds of the polls being as close as they were was 1 in 9.5 trillion times. As you'll be able to tell here, the polls were so incredibly close that it was more likely that there was something funky going on with the methodology of these polls. Now, the polls at least predicted last Tuesday was going to be a nail biter of a night, but as we all know, that didn't really happen. I mean, news outlets were calling the damn thing by like 4 or 5 a.m. Clearly, the pollsters, intentionally or unintentionally, they were playing it safe with the predictions for the presidential election. And it's tough for me to say what this means about the future of the polling industry, but at least for polling on the presidential elections, it's definitely lost some credibility to that effect, just especially after last week's disaster. Now, I, however, did not play it safe. Despite my plethora of issues with the Harris campaign, which even prompted me to vote for Jill Stein, I was pretty confident that Harris and Walz were going to win. Now, I base that on two things. One, the horrendous performance of Trump's campaign, and one wild poll from a historically accurate pollster in Iowa. Now, that second one, y'all, I don't know why I dedicated so much time to talking about one poll last week. It was certainly showing some wild projections, hinting that Harris was going to win Iowa by 3%, and I was just like, oh my gosh, y'all, it's an accurate pollster. I think she might get Iowa. Campaign update. She lost that state by 13%. I mean, she performed worse than Biden did in Iowa. He lost that state by only 8%, or about 8%. I let myself get entranced by one wild poll, and man, I don't know. I don't know what the f*** I was thinking. Now, the first one, Trump's campaign, I mean, that one was patently obvious. I'm not going to go through all the face plants of Trump's campaign. You can watch last week's episode on the kennel if you want to hear all my thoughts on that. I think the main thing to take away from Trump's victory is rather depressing. Among the 65% of the voting eligible population, the majority is either incredibly bigoted, mis or uninformed about who Trump is, or both. And I'm holding out hope that the remaining 35% aren't like that, but I don't know, man. The result of this election definitely has me losing faith in, I don't know, this country, society at large. I'd like to think that the majority of people deep down want to see the working class thrive, that they want to see the ruling class reined in, or better yet, demolished. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Really, I guess I overestimated how much weight that Trump's denial of the 2020 election was going to carry. I figured that no matter how much people agreed with his horrific worldview, they wouldn't be willing to vote for someone who had to be practically dragged out of the White House kicking and screaming. Turns out, at the very least, that's something that the majority of the 65% of voters this year could overlook. and we might pay for that dearly. I want to close out this scratch-looking segment with an important note, or maybe an important, ramble, I guess. Since Wednesday, naturally, I've seen people online playing the blame game. Now, that in and of itself is fine, depending on the person or group receiving the blame and their socioeconomic status. I mean, hell, I'm gonna be playing that. I'm gonna be playing that blame game in the next segment because, I got my grievances to air too. But even then, given the stakes of this specific election, we all have to deal with our knee-jerk upset somehow. And if that means spouting off broad condemnations to people or groups who didn't deserve it, fine. I mean, people feel the need to vent, especially those who are going to be most harmed by the potential threats of this upcoming administration. But it's almost been a week now, and given the results, now is not the time to be directing our anger at people who didn't vote or people who voted third party. I should be addressing the third-party vote shamers in the next segment, but regarding shaming the people who didn't vote and berating them as ignorant or stupid, y'all, I've spoken with people broadly who have either expressed excessive disgust at non-voters or said things like, well, you didn't vote, you don't get to complain. While I am someone who will always vote, if anything, out of a begrudging sense of obligation, I do need to challenge this notion that non-voters are just stupid, ignorant people, and the strategy behind shaming them wholeheartedly. First, I think we need to keep in mind an explanation from Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent, on what makes an election legitimate. When examining media coverage of elections in third world countries and comparing that coverage to the geopolitical interests of the United States, Herman and Chomsky explain the different qualities of an election that make it fair and legitimate. Now, one of those qualities, they noted, is the individual citizen's ability to freely choose whether or not to vote. For example, in countries like El Salvador, governed by a fascist right-wing junta government that was essentially controlled by a military funded by the U.S., citizens there were mandated by law to vote in elections at least in the early 1980s. Quote, the law stipulated that failure to vote was to be penalized by a specific monetary assessment, and it also called on local authorities to check out whether voters did in fact vote. This could be done because at the time of voting, one's identification card was stamped, acknowledging the casting of a vote. Anybody stopped by the army and police would have to show the ID card, which would quickly indicate whether the individual had carried out his or their patriotic duty. Just prior to the March 1982 election, Minister of Defense Garcia warned the population in the San Salvador newspapers that the failure to vote would be regarded as an act of treason. And in the 1984 election, quote, advertising by the government and military prior to the elections stressed the obligation to vote rather than the freedom to vote, unquote. Now, I don't know if that's still the case today. Someone can fact check me and let me know in the comments. Anyways, I mentioned that to demonstrate there's a couple reasons, or at least self-inferred reasons. Perhaps the founding fathers may have had their own reasons, but at least my reasons I can glean from this as to why developed democratic countries don't require people to vote by law. The first reason, such a law would force a nation's entire population to approve of the system of government as is. It would force the population to approve that. And number two, more specifically, if it's true that such a law would force approval of a government by the citizenry, then it's also true that the decision not to vote is still a vote that is cast. It's a rejection of that system as a whole. In fact, it doesn't even have to be that. The decision to not vote can simply be a vote that says, in this specific election, I don't approve of any of the options that I'm being given. Hell, not voting can just be a vote that says, oh my God, I'm a single mother with 2 kids who's having to work 3 jobs. I ain't got time to keep up with the news or read up on the candidates, much less take the time to fill out an absentee ballot, vote early, or stand in a line for an hour to cast a vote. Whatever the reason is for not voting, that is nonetheless still a vote. And here's the deal. I am sure that these people who say, you don't get to complain if you didn't vote, or the people who flat out belittle others as ignorant for not voting are well-intentioned people. Those notions come from a genuine sense of pride and love for democracy. But even from a strategic standpoint, it just doesn't work. If I put myself in the shoes of someone who doesn't vote, either because of a principled stance or a practical, logistical sense, and I have someone tell me, hey, you're ignorant because you don't vote, or you don't get to complain, even after I explain my reason for not voting, I would just tune you out. I would have my reasons, and in either case, my decision to not vote was still inherently a vote. The 35% of people these past couple of months who didn't vote effectively said, for whatever reason, I couldn't justify showing up to the polls. Now, you might not like to hear that, especially given the stakes of this election, but that's what that 35% said. And if you want that percentage to decrease, shaming those non-voters won't help. Now isn't the time to write off non-voters or third-party voters as idiots and check out of politics. For those of us working class citizens who are terrified by the prospects of this next administration, this is the time to organize. I'm talking about unionizing your workplace. If you're a campus worker, there's a Campus Workers United chapter here on campus that's trying to get you bi-weekly paychecks. If you're not a campus worker, but you got friends that you want to support, there's also the Student Worker Advocacy Organization on campus that's fighting for the same stuff. I'm also talking about forming those mutual aid groups. I saw people talking about and sharing different resources for LGBTQ plus support groups and reproductive health networks. Those things will be necessary. And if you're concerned about your rights being further suppressed, those will be important groups to rely upon. A little bit of self-promotion here too. If you want to start organizing our collective power as students, generally speaking, our school's YDSA chapter meets in the student union every Wednesday at 4 p.m. You can find more info at the Instagram page I operate at MTSUDSA. Again, that Instagram handle is MTSUDSA. I'll see you there, friend. Okay, now time for all of my told you so's. Now, first, let's address the general context of Harris's loss last week. This would not have happened had the DNC not meddled in the 2020 primary to snuff out any chance for Bernie Sanders to get the nomination. Y'all, this is not a conspiracy theory. Even sitting Democratic legislators like Adam Smith from Washington State have addressed this fact after Biden had that disastrous debate, albeit, in Smith's case, refraining from evaluating the soundness of that decision. Here's a July 8th clip of him giving an interview on CNN where he makes a reference to Bernie Sanders' suppression in the 2020 primaries.
Point. Yeah. So the president talked today about how now it's all the elites who are trying to force him out.
Right.
Let's remember what happened in 2020. Okay, the president did not run a great primary campaign. He lost badly in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. You came out of Nevada, and Bernie Sanders looked like the presumptive nominee. And this exact same group of people,
the elites,
that the president is now deriding as elites. And by the way, they're not. They're Democrats, okay? They're party operatives, they're donors, they're volunteers, decided, and to all the Bernie supporters out there, I'm not judging this positively or negatively, they decided they didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. They decided that Joe Biden would be the better nominee. And credit, again, to the president. He decided that because he did 8 years as vice president. He did the years in the Senate. He had the record to be a strong president. And so they, through their support behind Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren and Mike Bloomberg and Amy Klobuchar, and I may be forgetting a few others, stepped aside for the candidate who was better. This myth that somehow Joe Biden came in and rescued us, it has been a nationwide movement since Donald Trump was elected president. And in 2020, that nationwide movement said, Joe, you're the best guy, let's go. Right now, they don't think he is.
So what happens then in this?
So, again, not some wild conspiracy theory. This is a legitimate fact. I'm not going to revisit that whole history of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Ryan Grimm wrote about it in his book, The Squad, AOC, and the Hope of a Political Revolution. I actually did a review of it last semester. You can read more about the specifics there if you want. Had Bernie become the nominee, we would have seen that guy winning his second presidential election this year. But we're currently in the hellscape dimension where, ostensibly, Kamala Harris was the second choice to take on Trump after the first choice revealed to the public that he can barely spit out a sentence in a debate. Now, that word choice leads me to my first told ya today. There were some lefties like me who were saying, hey, people really don't seem to like Biden. If we're really concerned about Trump's threat to democracy, maybe, just maybe, we should embrace the democratic process and use it to determine who is the best person to take him on. That's why I supported Marianne Williamson's run for the nomination for this election cycle. That and the fact that out of all the options presented, she had the best policy platform by far. Certainly the closest to one that Bernie Sanders would have run on. And yeah, she would not have been my first pick, of course, given her shaky stance on vaccines, of all things, and then rumors of mistreating her staffers. But between her and Biden, Williamson's the better pick, and it's not even close. So, to all the people who said, no, Biden is the best person to take on Trump, but Marianne has said she listens to people who support and oppose vaccines. She said mean things to her staffers. Context, Biden did the same thing too. No one has ever held a primary against an incumbent. Oh! You, the big dog, was right on this one. Your pretentious and elitist deference to the DNC, you spineless hacks, because you contributed to a cultural mindset that endorsed Biden's decision to run again, despite him demonstrating that he's been in cognitive decline this entire time. Now, perhaps I wouldn't be speaking so strongly about this had I not seen numerous people stick their nose up in the air when, before then, I hadn't thought of them as the type of people to do that. And I probably wouldn't be speaking so strongly about this had I gotten to voice my support for Marianne over Biden in the Tennessee Democratic primary. But apparently, these self-appointed defenders of democracy at the Tennessee Democratic Party, they couldn't be bothered to do the democracy thing. So, to those people, and especially to the Tennessee Democratic Party, you, I told you so. Second, I told you so. Generally speaking, yes, the result of this election probably stemmed from pure bigotry among those who voted and a general anti-incumbency attitude. nonetheless, I'm going to bring this poll up again for like the third time on this show because it hints at just how detrimental the Democratic Party's leadership's support for Israel's plausible genocide in Gaza was to Harris's chances of victory. This comes from Zeteo. It's the new independent outlet from MSNBC and Intercept veteran Mehdi Hassan. Oh, that's right. I got to pull up the source view. There we go. Quote, in Pennsylvania, 34 respondents said they would be more likely to vote for the Democratic nominee if the nominee vowed to withhold weapons to Israel, compared to 7% who said they would be less likely. The rest said it would make no difference. In Arizona, 35% said they'd be more likely, while 5% would be less likely. And in Georgia, 39% said they'd be more likely, also compared to 5% who would be less likely. That means the poll suggests a net gain of 27% more likely Harris voters in Pennsylvania, 30% in Arizona, and 34% in Georgia. Now, obviously, more polls would be needed to more definitively ascertain what the effect, what kind of effect the Democratic Party's support for Israel actually had on this election. But I would bet that issue did affect people's voting behavior. It's kind of hard to vote for someone when they're supporting a nation that is overwhelmingly contributing to all the pictures of dead civilians in Gaza that have been popping up on their social media feeds for the past year. To emphasize how institutional and pervasive the Democratic Party's subservience is to the pro-Israel lobby, I want to share with you a recent post from the Instagram account Dear White Staffers. For those who don't know, Dear White Staffers is it's an Instagram account, Twitter account, just kind of like a decentralized social media operation that invites anonymous submissions from candidates and legislator staff to let people know about some of the insane bullshit that goes on behind the scenes in American politics. Quote, "Hi, I'd like to remain anonymous. I was managing a Democratic campaign in South Nashville, the Franklin, Tennessee area, and was fired for speaking out about Palestine. I run a small political Instagram page, and we had offered to create interview content for the candidates for free. But as soon as they realized our page was pro-Palestine, they canceled one by one. Most candidates use this local communications firm, which is run by a loud and proud Zionist. He told me to my face that he was telling candidates not to talk about Palestine, but also just gave them bad advice, like he broke up this quote-unquote progressive candidate coalition that some of our strongest candidates had formed. No solidarity, only fear and scarcity. Our teams lost so many youth volunteers who wanted to help but needed to see candidates take a stand on Palestine. Some of these candidates were running for Congress and still wouldn't touch the issue. All of them lost their races. This has made me never want to work in politics ever again." You know, I've been working on my honors thesis, and there was a Democrat running for public office who I contacted months in advance. I'm talking like April or March maybe. The politician, they told me they were very interested in interviewing, even gave me their phone number. I called the number, no answer. Never got that call back. So this is all to say that anyone who thinks the current Democratic Party is the adequate response to a fascist threat like Donald Trump after last week, and would rather blame the loss on the third-party voters who collectively, by the way, could not make up the votes that Harris lacked, or would rather make the people who legitimately voted by not voting. If you still think the current Democratic Party is gonna be a adequate response to whatever's the next fascist threat that we face in the next election. God help you. God help you. Perhaps you can advocate for a further push to the left and, for just push for overall better accountability to its voters and its members within your local Democratic Party. But based on personal experiences, I've heard from different folks. Best of luck. I'm curious to see how that goes. And if or when you come to a conclusion that's similar to mine, that that the Democratic Party is beyond reform at this point, well, again, YDSA meets every Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the Student Union. We'd love to have you. Hey friend, that's all I've got for today, but thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of The Unnatural State of Affairs. The Unnatural State of Affairs broadcasts on WMTS 88.3 FM in Murfreesboro, Tennessee from 5 to 7 p.m. on Mondays. The broadcasted version is censored, but I do also have a full DJ hour in the broadcasted version. I mostly play punk rock music and some rap music as well. And if you can't tune in at that time, though, you can also find the uncensored versions of all my talk show segments that day on my Substack, The Kennel, and you can also find audio-only versions on Spotify. If you liked what I had to say, hit that like button. If you have any thoughts that you want to share, hit me up in the comments section down below. And if you want to be notified of the next upload that I make, hit that subscribe button. You'll get an email in your inbox the next time I make an upload, and you'll also get a notification through the Substack app if you have that on your device. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good one.